Hi, this is Susan Pitcairn. I would like to introduce you today to a tool that you can find online. It's called footprintcalculator.org. And there, for free, you can calculate your impact on planet Earth. That is to say, how it would be if everybody lived exactly like you, how many planets it would take. So for the average American, that's right now about 5 planets. For the average global citizen, including all the people in the third world who live very simply compared to us, it would take right now about 1.7 planets. But the range is enormous. It varies from 0.2, from a very simple lifestyle, to, from what I've calculated, well over 12 planets. So there's a lot of variation, and much of it depends on diet and transportation, as well as the kind of house you live in. So let's take a look. We will start by looking at a personal example, myself and my husband. We do our best to live as green as possible. So the first thing that we look at is food. What percentage of the diet is from animal products? In our case, essentially none, because we're vegan and have been for years. Then we'll look at how much of the food we eat is unprocessed, unpackaged, or locally grown. In our case, it's about 88%. We do eat some bread, some canned food, and occasional packaged products. We live in a freestanding house with running water. It is built of wood. There's just 2 of us living in it, and the size of the house is about 2,087 square feet. We have electricity. Our efficiency is pretty high, putting it at about 89%, 90%. The percentage of our home's electricity that comes from renewable resources is very high because we have solar panels. In the summer, we sometimes use more because of the air conditioning, so I was conservative and put 90%. We generate much less trash than our neighbors, so I'm putting down about 8-10% on that range. We recycle everything we possibly can. And we drive an average of about 135 miles a week. And that's not because we're driving all over the place. We do a lot of bicycling and walking. But what we do is we take an annual trip to Oregon from Arizona, and that adds up. So I just took the annual average of about 7,000 miles and divided it out by 52 weeks. We do get an efficient mileage. We have a Prius with 45 miles a gallon. And I said that we carpool 80% of the time, and that's because most of the time it's two of us riding in the car, and 2 or more counts as a carpool. Now, we don't really travel on public transportation because we live in a small town. That's not really one of our options. And then I want to show you a difference here. If we were to take a trip to Europe this year for 40 hours of flying, we would use 2.3 Earths. But if we retake the quiz, and that's just too much, but if we retake the quiz, and we'll just whiz through it because it keeps the same settings here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on we go. And this time we're going to do it without flying at all. So we use 2.3 Earths when we flew to Europe. When we don't, we use 1.2 Earths, effectively reducing our consumption by about 1 Earth. This is huge. Now let's retake the quiz for someone else. I wanted to start with somebody who was like a blue-collar worker because we just had a bunch of guys out doing some work on the back lot behind us for the local utility company. And I'm thinking, what could they do? They're probably average guys that eat a lot of meat. They probably have a lot of fast food at McDonald's. And I'm going to say they're about we'll say 75% of the way over there on that scale. And I'm going to say probably most of the food that they eat is packaged. And so we're going to put them down to about 10% on the scale of fresh, local, or unprocessed foods. They do live in a freestanding house with running water. No, let's change that, to an apartment building, a duplex or something. And it's made out of wood. And they have 2 kids and they're married, and so they have 4 people in the house. It's not a real big house. Let's say it's about 40 square feet. And they do have electricity. It's not particularly efficient. It's just average, we'll say, or even less because it's an older building. We'll say about 30%. They don't use any energy from renewables. They generate, let's say, an average amount of trash. Now here's one of the problems is they drive 20 miles each way every day to get to work in a more expensive town that they can't afford to live in. And they don't even take big trips, but let's say that averages out to about 275 or so, 73 miles a week. They have a truck, some kind of rig. It could be worse, but let's say it's about 22 miles a gallon. They carpool once in a while, meaning they take the family out for McDonald's. They don't use public transportation, but they don't fly on a plane because they can't really afford that kind of thing. So what do they use? Isn't that unbelievable? That's 5.2 planets of use, and it's not like he's living a life of luxury. So let's see what they could possibly do since they don't have much money to work with. One thing they could do is they could change their diet. Let's say they went vegan. It's completely affordable. They also begin to use more unprocessed, fresh, and local foods, let's say 50%, just by making different food choices at the store, maybe shopping in bulk. They live in the same house, same people. The energy efficiency isn't not much they can do about that. And they can't put solar in. Their trash, however, they can use less trash. Let's say they begin to really watch what they buy and they recycle as much as possible. That doesn't cost them anything. As for the car, let's say they cut that down a little bit, maybe to 200 miles a week by taking a few less joy rides. And then it's the same efficiency, and the carpooling is the same, transportation, flying is the same. Now we're down to 2.1 Earths. So we went from 5 some Earths to 2.1, primarily mostly by going vegan. Now what happens if we just maybe add a motorcycle to that same scenario? Let's say everything else is the same. But now, instead of going by car so much, they go, let's say, only 50 miles a week by car with the family and all that. And then on their motorcycle is what they use now to commute to work. And let's say they do 200 miles a week. This is maybe something they could afford to buy. Efficiency of the fuel is about the same. We're going to say the motorcycle's very highly efficient. And carpooling is the same. Everything else the same. And now we're down to 1.7 Earths. So that's about probably as good as they can get. Hardworking people like this that make such a change are really to be appreciated and make a big difference. Now let's try somebody else. I wanted to go to the other extreme. I know someone who does a lot of international flying, and he happens to be mostly vegan. We'll say 10%. Because that's good for him, and he probably eats, 70% or so of his food packaged is because he's on the go all the time for business. And he lives in a freestanding house made out of wood, and we're going to say it's not real big, it's in kind of a coastal crowded area. There's 2 people living there. We're going to say the size of the place is about, I'll say a little bit bigger than the blue-collar guy, about 1240 square feet. And, of course, they have electricity. The efficiency of it, let's say because it's a newer home, is pretty high. We'll say about 70% or so. and he doesn't really use any energy from renewables in this place. And his trash use is, he recycles some, but he's still, gets a lot of stuff. He's a consumer. And then we're going to give him about 200 miles a week on the car. The efficiency of his car, Mercedes or something, so we'll say it's 30. As far as carpooling goes, we'll say about the same as the other guy, goes out with the family, with his wife a little bit. And not on public transportation, but he does fly a lot. And that's because he goes to Europe on business about 10 times a year, about 180 hours. Oh my gosh. 7.1 Earths. Well, that's about as high as it gets. Although I have done some calculations where people easily use 12 Earths if they have several big houses. Now let's go to the other extreme and do like an eco-vegan that lives in a city and doesn't have a car. And they're doing the best you possibly can in the United States. So they never eat meat. They are vegan. And they go to the farmers markets and all that. And so they are doing about as good as you can get in terms of unpackaged food. They live in an apartment type of building, which is efficient, and it's made out of wood. And there are 2 of them, and it's pretty small. Say, 800 or so, 792 square feet, let's say. Now let's give them a little bit more space. 891. Okay. They have electricity. The efficiency of it is 70% or so because it's a newer building. And the percentage from renewables is 0. That's not really in their control. The trash that they generate, however, is really low. They are really meticulous about it. We'll say about 5% or so on the scale. And in terms of miles by car, I'm going to say 0. This guy bikes and walks everywhere, or else he takes some public transportation, and we'll say that on that he maybe uses 11 miles or so a week, and he does not fly. Okay, he uses half an Earth. I think that's really impressive, don't you? In fact, it's really about as good as a third world villager living without electricity or plumbing, as we will see in just a moment. Okay, it's not really practical for a lot of Americans to live that way right now, but that looks like the wave of the future. A lot of young millennials are living without cars, living in cities, and it seems like something that's doable for a lot of people. In fact, using just about half an Earth would be an excellent goal for anyone. That's the amount that some experts are saying that we really need to do to keep our whole planetary ecosystems in balance. So let's look at that third world farmer. I'm going to say they eat about 25% animal products. In other words, they're mostly vegetarian. They eat their own eggs and dairy, very little meat. Let's say that 97% of their food is obtained fresh, local, unpackaged. In other words, they grow it themselves. Maybe they get a few spices and things like that. And they live in a freestanding house without running water, built of adobe, 5 people living in 387 square feet. They don't have electricity. They generate much less trash than most people or than their neighbors because they don't have much stuff. They have maybe a few plastic bottles and like that they get for use for containers. They don't travel by car because they don't have one. And occasionally they take a bus trip into the local town. And so let's say they do 8 miles a week on average in public transportation. They don't fly, of course. A person like this uses only 0.3 Earths, and that's really helpful. It helps not only reduce the footprint of all the other people on Earth, such as Americans and Europeans who are using far more than our equitable share, but they also are maintaining ways of life that are sustainable for the future. They have the knowledge of how to produce food. So what could you do to be part of the solution? One of the most important things that you can do is to eat plant-based, or to eat as few animal products as possible. It makes a huge difference. It takes some 10 to 15, 20 times more land, water, fertilizers, and fuel to produce an animal-based diet because of its inefficiency, not to mention the humane and health aspects. A second thing that you can do is to reduce your transportation. Increase the fuel efficiency of your car if you can afford to do so. Better yet, live close to where you work at home, walk and bike as much as possible. But most of all, avoid long-distance flying unless really necessary. That adds an incredible amount. Then finally, I would say, if it is something you might otherwise enjoy, getting a roommate actually reduces your footprint considerably. Now, on this website, I have to say, they overlook several things that are important. One is the number of children you may or may not have. Just think about it. Every child that you have increases the footprint by just as much as you do. So the footprint really has to do with how many people. So like one person could live on the planet totally extravagantly and maybe only use, a millionth of the resources of the planet. Whereas maybe 50 billion people would use maybe 50 Earths or whatever, even if they lived frugally. So obviously population's a big deal. Another thing that they don't seem to count is just simple things like, do you have a pet? For example, a meat-eating dog on the, quote, raw diet can consume as much, if it's a large dog, maybe 70 pounds, can consume as much in an ecological footprint sense as an adult human. And U.S. pets on average are the equivalent of a number of 5 nation on the planet in terms of their meat consumption all put together. So those things matter as well. And then they don't count other little things that you can do to help, like rainwater collection, gray water harvesting, composting, growing your own food, and all those kinds of little steps that you can take. They all add up. So I encourage you to take the footprint calculator test yourself and see where you stack up and see what you can do to improve it. As you can see, even for someone like ourselves that have gone the whole 9 yards in many ways, we still exceed, our share. That is to say, 1 Earth's worth of use. If we went a little further, I guess we could live in an apartment and be carless, eco-vegan hippies living in the city, and that would do it. What I'm hoping is that somehow there's an average that develops of its own, and kind of a natural harmony, a balance between people who are living very simply and those who are living a middle-class lifestyle. In summary, we can all only but do our best to create a better world, and we can only do it from wherever we're starting, from wherever we live, whatever kind of job or life situation we have, or what we were born into. These are all limitations as well as opportunities for each one of us to make a special contribution. And of course, it's only natural for people to want to live more abundantly and raise the quality of their lifestyle or ease their labor. Somehow we're going to have to find a balance that works for everyone. Most of all, I don't want you to use the results of this survey, if you take it for yourself, to beat yourself up or feel like, oh, now I can't fly, I can't eat whatever I want or whatever, and put a bunch of shoulds on yourself. The point is really to help you identify the things that make the most difference, and for you to reach inside your heart and look and see, what can you possibly do? That's all. And in that process, I think we need to trust that there's a greater intelligence within us and also within all life that's interconnected, that will find a way through us and with our cooperation to create a sustainable world that works for everyone and works for all beings. Let's be part of the solution for the greater good. Thanks for watching. And if you like this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Take care.